Hey guys, before we start the video, I just wanted to throw in a bit of an apology for the delay in this video coming out. I know the trailer is coming on 3 weeks old now and I promised the analysis would be released sooner, but I just honestly hadn't been in the mood to write, and the script itself has undergone a lot of changes as I was writing. I know some of you really look forward to my coverage, so I feel bad that I wasn't able to get to it right away. In any case, I feel a lot better now, and I think we've got a pretty good script to work with too. So, without further ado, let's begin. 2 months since the prior trailer, we have been blessed with a brand new look at Walpurgisnacht Rising before its Japanese release in August. This trailer is somehow loaded with a bunch of new information, and if you were there with me on the 29th of June, which was 1 am my time by the way, thank you for sticking around for my first reaction and analysis. This video will aim to refine my thoughts on the trailer and information that has been released since the April news dump. I will not be doing a trailer recap in this video since we went over it so extensively live. You can check the VOD if you want my initial recap and thoughts. Instead, I just want to jump right into analyzing the information, so, let's not waste any time and just get straight to the point. Before we get too far into the new stuff, I want to actually clear up an issue I personally have, which is with my last trailer analysis. If you want to skip ahead to see my analysis of new information, feel free to do so. The timestamps are below as always. I do not like how a lot of my last trailer analysis came out, and I get the vibe that it didn't perform too well either. I don't really care about my videos getting a lot of reach, but I do aim to present the information correctly and accurately. Unfortunately, I don't feel I did as good of a job as I could have, and the reason why is because I got caught up learning and rediscovering things I never associated with the movie before, and as a result, ended up presenting what I think ultimately turned out to be more of a jumbled stream of thoughts to account for the findings that I hadn't considered. It is no secret that I took a lot of information from Karma's anime analyses video predicting the film's plot to describe scenes in the trailer, which in hindsight was poor form. Not that Karma's video isn't a good resource, honestly, I believe it is. I just think it skewed my perception of things a bit too much. Luckily, we have a great community whose comments have helped steer me back to basics when it comes to analyzing what we're seeing rather than me focusing on trying to predict things that I'm not 100% sure on. So I want to highlight a few comments here that pointed out things I missed or might have been misinformed on. Quite a few people pointed out that I should have included the series Review Starlight when spotlighting Mr. Furukawa's work and his potential additions for the movie. In hindsight, I absolutely agree. I'm only very loosely familiar with his work, but even just a quick look at Review Starlight, and I can see why most agree that it was probably his directorial work on this series that got him his position for Walpurgisnacht Rising. Don't worry, this one is now on the to-watch list for sure. Revert009 mentioned that instead of looking at the scene of Nagisa and Selma pole dancing as literally romantic, it could be a forced performance like a play, as it contrasts with Nagisa dancing on her own in a prior trailer. I agree. I think there's a level of performative happiness in these trailers, and a lot of it may even be coming from Selma herself. Thank you for your comment. Conundrumism9215 pointed out that the idea of the Wraiths invading is not accurate, and yep, that's totally on me. At the end of the Rebellion story, we hear point blank that Homura is aware of their existence, mockingly suggesting that once they're gone, she might even destroy the world. Thank you for that. Lastly, I want to spotlight Cold Gold Lazarus, who left a great comment about our mystery character. The girl in question appears to be fighting the Wraiths, so it would be weird if she is, as I offered as speculation, Wraith Madoka. We can safely say now that she is not Wraith Madoka, and appears to have ties to Homura, but we will get to her soon. While it is true that she isn't Wraith Madoka, or at least it's highly unlikely now, we can't ignore the fact that she does have some kind of tie to them. She falls from a building directly into what appears to be some kind of smoke that signifies the arrival or creation of a wraith, and is later seen cradled by one. Whatever it is, she is tied to them somehow. Thank you to these people and anybody else who left comments on my video. I appreciate the feedback and corrections immensely. Now, without further ado, let's talk about the new content, huh? When she first debuted in the 2023 official trailer, a lot of speculation went around about who this mystery girl could be. Theories have shifted drastically over time about her, but one thing has remained consistent. She does appear to have some kind of amalgamation of at least Homura, Madoka, and Mami as part of her design, with some going as far to speculate that she could be a combination of all the magical gods in the Holy Quintet. Personally, I push back on her being a literal amalgamation or a fusion, but it's clear that design wise, she is absolutely supposed to make us think of those three characters. For the sake of covering everything, let's first go over exactly what we can see in the amalgamation and why we assume that they are like this. Dance is a recurring motif that's important to both Madoka and Homura, something made very apparent in the Rebellion story. Much of the Nutcracker Witch's Labyrinth is designed as though it is a stage play, with dance and ballet being important symbols scattered about in various places. At the end of the film, when she is finally alone, we see Homura dancing all by herself. The first time that we see Madoka in the concept movie trailer, she's practicing ballet with Homura watching. This is imagery that can be used to compare Madoka to a ballerina trapped inside of a music box, which is a metaphor for Homura's labyrinth. In Walpurgisnacht Rising's September 2024 trailer, we were shown Madoka and one of the dummy Homuras dancing together. And now, in the latest trailer, the Amalgamation is seen performing ballet poses mid-combat, giving her a link to dance, the recurring motif shared between Madoka and Homura. The Amalgamation seems to have two weapons. The first is her bow, which shares a similar color to Homura's bow from the end of the original series and parts of the Rebellion story. Both Madoka and Homura use a bow as a weapon, though the bow itself is more commonly associated with Madoka as it is her primary weapon, which also seems to be the case for the new character. While they aren't the same color, there are these gem fixtures on the Amalgamation's bow which I believe bear a similar shape to Homura's soul gem. Of course, this also has a visual similarity to Madoka's bow which has similar gem fixtures inside of it. What I think is the second weapon is the red ribbon. In this new trailer, it appears the ribbon takes the place of a traditional arrow for her bow, making it similar to Madoka's blasts of light, energy, or magic. Ribbons in general are associated with Mami, as a transforming ribbon is her main weapon. However, they are also associated with Madoka and Homura as they have both worn thin ribbons in their hair. The color of this girl's ribbons links the most to Madoka, whose hair ribbons are red. That said, a reference to Mami can still be found, as Mami uses a red ribbon to bind Homura in episode 3 of the original series. The Amalgamation character wears glasses that have a thick-rimmed frame on the underside. They don't seem to be quite the same color, but they are almost identical to the glasses worn by Homura during her first few timelines and in the Rebellion story. Perhaps the biggest bundle of visual evidence about this character and why discussion has steered towards her being a fusion or amalgamation is her clothes, as parts of it appear to be referencing the outfits of Madoka, Homura, and Mami. The references to Homura can be seen in her overall color palette and the collar forming diamond shapes similar to Homura's outfit as a magical girl. The pleated skirt design that she sports is also most similar to Homura's. On the back of the Amalgamation's outfit is a black ribbon which is placed in the same spot as a similar ribbon on Homura's and Mami's magical girl outfits. Additionally, this is where a large ribbon is seen on Madoka's new magical girl outfit for Walpurgisnacht Rising. The button placement across the chest is slightly similar to the buttons seen in Madoka's outfit, but also bears a resemblance closer to that of the ones seen on Mami's outfit. The black ribbon on the Amalgamation's neck/collar calls to mind how Mami's original outfit had her ribbon around her collar too, something that's fascinating considering that the neck ribbon is missing from Mami's Walpurgisnacht Rising redesign. Lastly, the Amalgamation has detached sleeves with pronounced inflated shoulder coverings that are the most similar to Mami's original outfit, but also share similarities to Madoka. Now I want to discuss her color palette. Friend of the channel, Arugi, brought up the idea of blending the palettes of the Holy Quintet to see if the color average would match the color of the mystery girl. It does produce a beige-brown color, yes, but with the new trailer showing off more of this character, it has become abundantly clear that the main characters she references is mostly limited to Madoka, Mami, and Homura. The first thing I did was grab the hex codes for the colors of Madoka, Mami, and Homura using well-lit shots from the most recent trailer that match the lighting of a shot that gives us the best look at the amalgamation. Then, with an online blending tool, I tested it and got a color average of the following hex code. Running my own blending test, I got the following hex codes, first for the hair, and then also for the eyes and the darker shading lines. Finally, to compare it with the amalgamation, I color-picked her hair from the recent trailer and got the following hex code, which in the video is the first one in this screenshot. The method is not foolproof, obviously, but we can see that we are circling an average palette of beige and brown on the darker side. The online tool had a result that matched the closest to the original color-picked result as well, giving me some confidence in backing this observation and adding even more fuel to the fire in regards to whether this girl is a fusion or not. The other big thing we learn about this character is that there's an incubator that emerges wearing her glasses and holding her bow in its mouth, which has predictably sent a wave of intrigue through the fandom circles that I'm in. This has greatly interested me too, so let's discuss the possibilities brought to light by this reveal. Possibility number 1. Kyubey became a magical girl. From what I can tell, this might be the community's general consensus on what this girl is supposed to be, and it's not like there's no potential setup for this either. In the original show's 11th episode, after it details its species' involvement with humanity throughout history, Kyubey pushes back on Madoka's notion that the incubators are unfeeling. It says that while a majority of their species is unfeeling, there are outliers who express emotion. The difference is that their kind considers the act of expressing emotion to be a mental disorder, which is why their fascination with humanity is so high. It showed them something they considered to be an impossibility, that a society could function and survive even if each of its participants were unique and had differing emotions from one another. An incubator's main role on Earth appears to be absorbing the negative emotions of grief seeds and later grief cubes as well. And during the ending of the Rebellion story, Homura implied that the incubators would be the sole carriers of the world's curses now that the system put in place by the Law of Cycles was overthrown. That is to say, there has been a building setup related to the idea of an incubator not only being able to express emotions, but possibly even becoming a magical girl, being able to, quote, understand how much they suffered, as was Madoka's challenge to Kyubey in episode 11. However, I don't think that is quite the case, and we should definitely explore the other possibilities first before settling on an answer. Possibility number 2. The Law of Cycles is reconstructing itself. So I get to claim ownership to this theory, as back when the first trailer dropped, my mind immediately went to this as the then most likely answer for this character. At the time, I thought we'd see this character be revealed as the Law of Cycles attaining a human form, built based on Madoka's memories. The general idea was the following. After the splitting of Madoka from the goddess, fragments of her memory would stay behind in the Law of Cycles, much like how a fragmented recollection of her being a goddess stays with Madoka when she's torn away. These fragmented memories are then used as the basis of a body that would be built by the Law of Cycles to interact with the world again, explaining why the amalgamation looks like various characters in Madoka's life, yet not perfectly matching any one in particular. My smoking gun for this idea was the fact that the mystery girl had, until recently, been shown with her eyes oddly obscured in every shot, and I believed that not only were they golden like the Law of Cycles, but that revealing them as such this early would ruin a major plot point in the film. Unless they have edited them, otherwise, the mystery girl's eyes are brown, similar to her hair, effectively debunking the best piece of evidence regarding her possibly being the Law of Cycles. It's not impossible for her to still be the Law of Cycles, but we have a decent amount of counter evidence to consider now. The mystery girl only seems to share features with Madoka, Mami, and Homura specifically. If it were the Law of Cycles, why would her body not more closely mirror either all of the members of the Holy Quintet or at least Nagisa and Sayaka, the two closest allies of the Law of Cycles? At the time, I suggested that because it's mostly taken from Mami and Homura, it's actually evidence in favor of the girl being made from the Law of Cycles memories since Mami and Homura are so important to Madoka. However, I think this simply doesn't hold up under scrutiny as evidence for the Law of Cycles. Possibility number 3, the Kyubey conduit theory. So this is similar to the idea that Kyubey is becoming a magical girl, but with some distinctions which I believe make it stand out from that interpretation. First, there can be absolutely no mistaking that this girl and Kyubey share some connection, cause denying it would be kinda pointless. So, based on the fact that she seems to be a mix of the aforementioned characters, that the incubator with her glasses appears in what is likely the aftermath of the Wraith fight, and that she seems to be emotionless in combat, it would be safe to assume that this girl is a creation of the incubators or an incubator modified by Homura in some way. Of the two, I believe the latter to be the more likely, as it was set up in the Rebellion story. In the trailer, when this mystery girl appears, it seems like Mami is talking about her, effectively saying, quote, "She's not a magical girl, yet she can transform and fight wraiths without issue," which I find interesting. But I have to wonder if the trailer is really talking about her, or if it's Mami talking about Homura, who is in fact not a magical girl anymore, but is a demon, something which is also brought up in the same set of scenes. If we explore this line even further though, we can find it possibly linking to people other than our mystery girl, and the first on the chopping block are Selma and Choka. As an aside, yes, I'm aware that Choka has a different official name, but due to my desire to not mispronounce it, I'm opting for Choka, as it is easier for me to say at the moment. As revealed with their new character artwork, neither of these two new magical girls have soul gems, though we know they have soul gem rings, something we'll discuss more in depth later in the video. We can be sure that Selma and Choka are gaining their powers from the Law of Cycles. This trailer seems to confirm their connection more than ever, and at this point the only other person with power comparable enough to the Law of Cycles would be Akuma Homura. Thus, I'd feel comfortable suggesting this girl's ability to become a magical girl is coming straight from Homura herself, as she too appears to lack a soul gem, which would also explain how an incubator is tied into this, as it would be the end result of what Homura said. The incubators would bear the curses of the world. There's just one thing we'll need to clear up first. The plot summary and trailer seems to imply that this girl is tied to a force that's presenting some kind of resistance to Homura, one of two in fact, with the other being Selma and Choka, who are searching for the Law of Cycles. If that implication is true, then it seems less likely that she's a creation of Homura or anything to do with her, but that's assuming that we're even right about the plot summary. Let's put a pin in this discussion for the time being and talk about this new information and mysterious new force. So, this name has popped up in discussion regarding the film, and while it seemed like there was a good chance this could have been the name of the mystery character, the English trailer has made it more clear to me that this is the name of a specific location. With this in mind, let's talk about this name because it provides some fascinating details. With the help of a friend of the channel, Electrosa, I have learned that it is a made-up compound word. What this essentially means is that it is made up of specific kanji that have meanings of their own, slapped together to make a descriptive word that is essentially made to evoke those specific separate meanings in one word. An equivalent English example would be if I were to call a shop Happy Music Sound. The word itself is not necessarily a real one, but the words which make it up instantly tell you what you need to know about the shop and what it's trying to accomplish. With that in mind, let's go ahead and take a look at what the separate kanji in this word mean. This is pronounced as na in Japanese and ming in Chinese. In Japanese, it primarily means name, but looking at the Chinese translations, it gets much more interesting, and it more accurately refers to titles or identifiers. Specifically, it seems to be associated with fame or reputation, as well as denoting a first name. Pronounced as suka or zuka, this is translated to tomb or mound in English. It can also refer to hills, but typically it refers to a man-made mound like a tomb or a grave. This is pronounced as soko in Japanese and de in Chinese. Both essentially mean bottom or base, referring to something below, though more accurately, it can be interpreted as meaning foundation. And this fits well with what we've learned about the name in the context of the movie. Interestingly, in Chinese, it can also mean specifically the end of a period of time. Pronounced as ne in Japanese and gen in Chinese, the word literally means root, as in plants, but metaphorically it is used to denote the source of something's origins, i.e., its roots. So, what I can discern is that the name is a lot like that of the Law of Cycles. In Japanese, the name is Enkan no Kotowari. That name is not a compound word like this one from what I can tell, but I doubt the name in English will remain as Nazuka Sokotsune. The trailer tells us point blank that this Nazuka Sokotsune is the origin of all witches, and the synopsis suggests that this place is a point of contention for Homura. We've seen Homura talking seemingly about Walpurgisnacht to an incubator or sayaka inside of a certain location, that being the library with the glass humanoid statue. As it turns out, some sleuths in the community found that the spines of the books in this location actually do have this exact kanji. It seems pretty clear that the place we're calling the library may in fact be Nazuka Sokotsune. I don't know if anyone else found this, but I found it from Tumblr user KC Flowers, so huge thanks to them. To me, this is a very satisfying answer because it seems that Walpurgisnacht and Nazuka Sokotsune are linked in some way. And if this is that same place, we have a link through the fact that the books have the visage of Walpurgisnacht on them. If Nazuka Sokotsune is the origin of all witches, then Walpurgisnacht must also come from this place in some way, right? Something I'm not too sure on is what this exactly means. I doubt it's a literal origin point. I don't think it can be due to the nature of the Madoka Magica universe unless what we know about witches is a total lie, and I doubt that's the case. Yeah, I just don't see a situation where there is a single place where all witches came from. Instead, maybe it could be where Walpurgisnacht comes from and where all witches go or are drawn to, and when they do, that is when Walpurgisnacht awakens. So what does this mean for the amalgamation? If we assume the above information to be mostly true, and that Nazuka Sokotsune refers to a location, specifically the Glass Library, as a point of origin for all witches, potentially including Walpurgisnacht, we need to address the elephant in the room. Given that Nazuka Sokotsune is mentioned alongside the appearance of the incubator wearing the girl's glasses, is it possible that she's linked to this place, and could she be Walpurgisnacht? It's certainly plausible, but I don't feel confident in saying she is with absolute certainty. As easy as it would be to say that this girl is just Walpurgisnacht's magical girl and leave it at that, my gut feeling is that it just isn't the case. This girl does appear to be some kind of amalgamation of different characters, much like how Walpurgisnacht is described as a group of many witches, yes, but my gut is telling me otherwise, especially when we have another strong contender. While I haven't been able to do much investigation into her, I think that this parasol-holding dummy Homura is the character codenamed Wasu from the concept movie production stills, and it's her who I think is most likely going to become Walpurgisnacht. Something we need to consider is that this Homura, who I think is Wasu, also seems to lack a traditional soul gem. Given that I am sure we've seen her magical girl design, it would mean she too can transform without a soul gem, making her a fitting target of Mommy's quote-unquote abnormal observation. The point is this. Mommy's quote being match cut with the mystery girl does not necessarily mean the line is about her specifically. The anomaly is that there's a girl able to transform into a magical girl without a soul gem. We know that both Wasu and this mystery girl appear to lack a soul gem. The only link to the amalgamation is the fact that Mommy specifically says this anomaly she's referring to is fighting wraiths, but we know Homura has come into contact with wraiths as well. While it's most likely Mommy is talking about the amalgamation, let's not jump to conclusions and say it's confirmed when we have other candidates as well. After some back and forth, what I'm settling on for the amalgamation girl is that she is a container or a conduit for the despair of the world given shape by Homura using an incubator. Maybe even the one we saw in the ending of the Rebellion story who was shivering. I believe she is an incubator, mostly because of her expressionless face. It would match pretty well with the general emotionless faces of the incubators. Both her and who I'm calling Wasu generally have a lot going for them in terms of being the one who becomes the ultimate witch, and while I'm leaning towards Wasu, I'm still pretty interested to see what you guys have to say on this topic. So, as you guys know, if you've been keeping up with my speculation, my belief regarding Selma and Choka and their roles in this film are that they are ultimately here to reawaken the law of cycles. My theory extends as far as suggesting that they are working directly with the incubators and are attempting to cause several witches to appear at once to trigger the arrival of Walpurgisnacht, something that presumably only the law of cycles can handle. The more ambitious parts of my theory aren't yet confirmed, but the idea that Selma and Choka are here for the law of cycles definitely is. So good work to everyone in the community who has been deducing this about the two girls. With this as confirmation, we can likely fill in some blanks regarding origins and identities. On my pre-name reveal investigation into Selma and Choka, user Rotten Kauru suggested that Selma might not just be cheatery, as she never had a full character established at the time of Portable. While I don't agree with the entire comment, I do think that they were onto something with this observation, and I think this trailer might confirm what it is that's going on with Selma and Choka. I think we can all agree that Selma and Choka are magical girls of pre-existing witches. That seems confirmable beyond any reasonable doubt. And for my observations on this, you can refer to my 1 hour 30-minute investigation into everything regarding them and my April 2026 trailer analysis for details that I missed. In terms of identity, what seems to now be the case with Selma and Choka is that they are taking inspiration from at least two or more characters we've seen prior to this film, essentially synthesizing them into fully fleshed out characters. In the case of Choka, in the first episode of the series, there does so happen to be an incidental student who is part of the crowd surrounding Homura. This girl, while not an exact match, might have served as a design base and inspiration for who would eventually become Choka. I think it's reasonable to assume that Paula, who we can be sure is this girl's witch form, did not have a magical girl at the time of her inclusion in Drama CD4, and when it came time to put together the production material for the concept movie, maybe this background character was selected as inspiration. Recently, actually as of a couple of days ago, Paula was given an event in Magia Exedra. I believe she was part of a score attack or something like that. She was also given an updated look for her labyrinth, and look what they added. A temple not unlike the imagery surrounding Choka in Walpurgisnacht Rising. If we needed any more proof, this is it. Choka is definitely Paula. But even beyond that, we have something else that further proves that at least Selma originates from the original series, and it is the fact that these two know about the law of cycles. In the trailer, Choka is quoted as saying that the law of cycles is what saved her from despair, and Selma follows up saying that you, almost certainly referring to Madoka, are that goddess, confirming that they know the law of cycles exists and that at least Selma seems to know who that is. We'll get the obvious out of the way, but the only reason for this to be possible is if both girls were rescued by Madoka while she was the Law of Cycles. For an easy comparison, in the Rebellion story, we have Nagisa and Sayaka, who are confirmed to be working on Madoka's behalf, who both know she is the Law of Cycles, and both girls were saved by her in the past. Compare their understanding to Kyoko and Mami, who towards the end of the film discuss the law of cycles in a way that is less familiar than Sayaka and Nagisa. Additionally, we see that both of these girls are able to summon minions. We used Choka's proximity to creatures resembling Bono to determine that she is Paola's magical girl. And in the most recent trailer, we see Mami fighting what is almost certainly a minion of whoever Selma's witch is, likely Chidori. This act is almost identical to how Sayaka and Nagisa fight Homura in Rebellion. They can control their witch forms and summon minions at will in a way not too dissimilar from the Doppel system seen in Magia Record. Also, let's clear up a quick possible misconception. In this trailer, we do see Selma and Choka in a reanimated sequence where they fall from the sky and likely engage Akuma Homura in battle. In this version of the sequence, they leave behind a peculiar trail that is usually only seen when witches are on the move. Is what I imagine to be a visualization of the magical breadcrumb trail Mami talks about when she explains how to track witches. Anyway, this might have led to a belief that they are just witches in disguise. This could still be the case, sure, but I doubt it. While we haven't seen what their soul gems look like normally, we know that they have soul gem rings. We've seen them pre-transformation. Again, it's possible I'm wrong, but upon further examination, I simply think this is just a case similar to Sayaka and Nagisa, and they will be able to control their witches. In my Discord server, user Mixed Mango shared some observations they made browsing the wiki and the original show that can further add to our discussion regarding where exactly the character of Selma originates from. A lot of people in the community have thrown out this idea already, but I want to put it into one clean package that's easy to refer to. So as we know, Selma has motifs related to both teddy bears and sewing. The sewing motif links her to the needle witch Chidori from Madoka Magica Portable, but the teddy bear motif can seem a bit disconnected. The Puella Magi Wiki lists a potential link between Selma and a character with teddy bear theming from the end of the original series, one of the many girls Madoka is shown saving as the Law of Cycles. The wiki holds back, saying it's unclear if the link is intentional, but I think we have enough to suggest it is. In the past, I have already said I am fairly confident that Selma is the finalized version of this character, but let's really dive into this and try to prove it definitively. The concept movie trailer shows the line art of a girl in a Mitaki Horror City school uniform, and comparing her overall look and hair, we can match it nearly perfectly to the teddy bear girl from episode 12. Another production still shows line art of what is very obviously one of the earliest design concepts of Selma's magical girl form. This was back when the teddy bear motif was more prominent, enough to the point where she would have had a hood in the shape of a teddy bear's head. Comparing what little of her hair we can see in the line art sketch of Beta Selma to the hairstyle of the girl in the school uniform and the teddy bear girl, we can see it matches pretty well. Too well, in my opinion, to brush off as a coincidence. We have no reason to assume that the teddy bear girl is not Selma, and that several different unfinished earlier concepts have come together for the character in the final film, including Chidori. With the details summarized, I want to talk a bit more about my theory on their roles in the film. Moreover, I want to see if it still holds up. Ever since we figured out these two are probably the magical girl forms of Chidori and Paula, I have been speculating that their role will, in some way, be to cause the summoning of a new Walpurgisnacht. As a refresher, the general idea is that because Walpurgisnacht is a witch made up of a collective of other witches, it can only appear in areas where there is abnormally high witch activity. In essence, this means that in order for Walpurgisnacht to appear in the movie, we would need to see this abnormal spike in activity. But that begs the question, where would it come from? I believe this Walpurgisnacht will be a conjunction of the witch forms of Selma, Choka, Sayaka, Mami, and Kyoko, and moreover that all of these witches will emerge either at once or in close proximity to one another. A part of this that I think doesn't hold up is the idea that Selma's and Choka's transformations into witches will cause this. If they are part of the Law of Cycles and able to control their witches like the Doppel system implies, it means they are effectively resolved of their despair. The other key factor with Walpurgisnacht is that it is a cumulation of despair. In my head, this means you can't expect what is effectively a doppel to be thrown into the mix. Doppels are creatures born from the resolution between a magical girl and her despair. With this thrown in as a possible issue, could just the awakening of Octavia Candeloro and Ophelia cause Walpurgisnacht's arrival? Well, also probably not. I doubt it's as literal as that. While we don't know exactly what caused Walpurgisnacht's original appearance in the first timeline, we can be sure it did not have anything to do with anyone necessarily witching out. While they might not be responsible for Walpurgisnacht's awakening, we can certainly infer that they will be the cause of Homura's downfall. If we pay close attention to the background in the scene where Homura's wing is destroyed, we can see that it matches with the background of a few key scenes we have witnessed already, and those scenes are ones we already speculated would be linked using the same justification. If you recall, we previously linked the scenes of Selma and Choka falling from the sky to this particular shot of Akuma Homura spiraling out of control and falling back down to Earth. With hindsight, I can't believe I never noticed that Akuma Homura is down a wing in this older shot, by the way. With it being highly likely that Selma and Choka are allies to the Law of Cycles, this alone might be why they're able to beat Homura in the first place, even with her power boost. We can also link this scene to the one of Akuma Homura on her back looking defeated from one of the older trailers, which you can see based on her wings. Additionally, I think that this battle will actually occur fairly early on in the movie, and it's not going to be towards the end. I reckon we're going to see Homura out of commission for some time, and it might be why she has to go to Sayaka and eventually also Mami and Kyoko for help once the real threat, presumably Wasu, starts getting close to Madoka. Less of a theory per se and more of an observation, it's clear that Tarot and the major arcana have their metaphorical claws dug deep into this film's identity. The first trailer for the movie gave us what is effectively a massive depiction of the Moon Arcana, introducing us to one of the variations of Homura. The theory, I guess, comes with applying what these arcana might mean for the film in general, and determining if their meanings can offer any insight into the plot and characters. Tarot is, as are a lot of symbolic readings, subjective. My reading of these may well differ from yours. I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong way to read into symbolism, and we can never be 100% certain of authorial intent when dissecting it. If you have a different reading of these and how you think they apply, then share your thoughts below. I actually do my best to respond and engage with everyone who comments, so I'm always open to further discussion. The most straightforward comparison due to it being shown to us off the bat. The moon is tied very closely to Homura due to the arcana's association with illusion, intuition, and the lesson of trusting instinct. This was essentially what Homura's journey in the Rebellion story boiled down to, but with us now in a new era in Walpurgisnacht Rising, we should be asking how it can apply to what we know about this film. The Moon is also about fear and insecurity. A standout line for me in this trailer in particular is Homura declaring that nothing can make her scared in this world, with the scene's match cut to imply not only is this false, but what she is scared of or will be challenged by is of course the arrival of the mystery magical girls. To me, this is certainly in line with the fear and anxiety aspects of the reading. What's interesting is what the moon represents when reversed, which is the release of fears and anxieties, the truth, and, weirdly enough, self deception. In several shots, which we'll touch on a little bit more later, we see scenes of Homura or the backdrop behind her turning upside down, which to me naturally fits with this whole reversal idea from Tarot. If Homura is represented by the moon and is being reversed, then I imagine we see this at some point towards the end of the second act of the film, maybe with the collapse of her labyrinth. Not sure what to make of the self-deception part. Maybe it could be a referenced in a tongue-in-cheek way with Wasu, who is visually like Homura tricking ours in some way, thus self-deception in a very literal sense. The world will not exonerate her. This has become the movie's tagline, and on the surface, it may not mean too much other than what we already assume is the movie's general plot. The world will, in some way, react negatively to Homura's actions. If we view this through the lens of the major arcana, however, we begin to see this line a little bit differently. I don't think that any one character alone necessarily represents the world, but if there was anyone we could link it to, I think this would be Madoka, but specifically as the Law of Cycles. It's become fairly clear that Selma and Choka are girls saved by the Law of Cycles, and as they will likely be the antagonistic force leading the film for at least the first two acts, we can also by proxy suggest that the Law of Cycles is an antagonist in some way. I myself have been saying this since I started making Madoka Magica speculation and analysis. I believe it makes the most sense for Madoka, or the Law of Cycles, to be an antagonist to Homura in her own story, since the franchise itself is built off of a clash between the wishes of both girls. If we take the tagline to be referring to the Law of Cycles, it implies an interesting potential turn for Madoka's character. I don't think necessarily it means Madoka will hate Homura, just that she will provide the biggest obstacle for her to overcome. In this trailer specifically, we see a few instances of reversal quite literally when we examine specific shots of Madoka and Homura as they are standing before a spinning background that eventually flips upside down. As excellently pointed out by Karma, Choka, and more specifically her minions Bona, represent this reversal both literally and symbolically, as their only method of attack is to flip the intruders upside down. Karma suggested that at some point in the film, we will see this metaphorical reversal happening where everything Homer has been working towards gets swept out from under her. And lo and behold, we have seen direct evidence of this. Of course, it is the shot of Akuma Homura losing one of her wings. Interestingly enough, a recently released promotional piece on Twitter showed artwork of Akuma Homura for the film, which crops off half of the same wing we see her lose in this trailer. It is clear that this is the point where Homura's actions catch up to her and someone gets the upper hand, that someone very likely being both Selma and Choka acting on behalf of either Kyubey or the Law of Cycles. I bring the Fool into the discussion because of the scene of a Homura looking at herself in a mirror shaped like a shell, which has Dume Venus inscribed on it. Dume Venus effectively means stupid or foolish beauty, as Venus is the goddess of beauty. However, Venus is also considered a goddess representative of love and desire. With this reading, we could also consider this mirror to effectively be inscribed with the phrase foolish or naive love, and with Homura's reflection above it, it could be seen as her being framed, labeled as the one with the foolish or naive love. To me, this fits Homura incredibly well. She is the only character in the series who has an explicit defined goal related to love, bringing Madoka back out of the Law of Cycles. I want to go over a full analysis of Taro and Madoka Magica at some point, probably in a future video. I was originally going to include it in this script as my quote-unquote big theory for the month, but the scope of the theory became much bigger than I was expecting. If, however, that's something that interests you, let me know and I'll be working on releasing that theory as its own separate video soon. Credit where it is due. Karma recently put out this short connecting some dots I've been circling myself for a while but never quite zoomed in on, and that is the importance of the colors purple and gold in this film. I doubt we will come to the same conclusion about what it means, so be sure to subscribe to Karma's channel and keep an eye out for his next video. Okay, so what am I even referring to? A consistent part of this film's marketing is the logo changing the color of its font from purple to gold. This obviously means something, and we might be able to work it out with just a little bit of digging. It's been bugging me for a while, as no one single interpretation I could land on satisfied me, but I have a couple that I'd like to offer. Let's get this out of the way first. It's the logo. So if the colors are going to represent anyone, that almost certainly is Homura and Madoka, but more specifically Arcana Homura and the Law of Cycles / Ultimate Madoka. The way the color transitions from purple to gold almost feels like the purple is being burned away to reveal the gold underneath. To me, this could be a visual metaphor for what might happen at the end of the movie. As we know, Homura's labyrinth more than likely sits atop the world Madoka created, so if we were to burn it away, we would see the real world below it. An interesting note about the color purple is that many studies agree it doesn't even exist as a visible color on its own in the light spectrum, and that its wavelength is the brain filling in the gaps by mixing red and blue light. In effect, it can be understood that purple is a fake color. The specifics of the science don't necessarily interest me, but the idea of purple being fake fits in well with the idea I have proposed a moment ago. Purple represents Homura, and Homura's labyrinth is an illusion, a fake world. Perhaps it being overtaken by gold represents the illusion of her world being undone. Norse myths regarding Siegfried have turned out to be rather important when it comes to better mapping out the type of story we may see from Walpurgisnacht Rising. In my last video, we went over a few new details which point towards Selma being a mirror of Madoka in several key ways, and one of those came about in a link between Selma's name origins and the Norse epic Nibelungenlied, in which the great hero Siegfried is killed by a man named Hagen, who is beheaded by Kriemhild in turn as an act of revenge. As we've previously discussed, Selma is linked to Hagen through her etymology via the name Salem and the character from Sabrina the Teenage Witch, Salem Saberhagen, and Kriemhild is obviously linked to Madoka as her witch form bears this name. So that just leaves us with Siegfried needing to be mapped to Homura. In most stories about Siegfried, we learn that he has skin as hard as a rock except for a single spot due to him bathing in the blood of a dragon that he slayed. Usually this is Fafnir. In promotional trailers for Walpurgisnacht Rising, we have seen a few instances of Homura being partially submerged in blood or outright bleeding. The first thing that happens in the rebellion story after she becomes a demon is similarly tied to this, as while talking to Sayaka, blood soaks Homura's face. If we pair this with the salamander imagery associated with her and the choker worn by Akama Homura appearing to evoke the visage of a dragon, it becomes very clear that she is a stand-in for this hero of legend. With all of this clear, what's so important about seeing Homura through the lens of Siegfried? Well, like similar myths of near-invulnerable heroes like Balder the Brave or Achilles, while they are all nearly entirely untouchable, they each have a single weak point. You could also argue that this is further strengthened because of dragons in general. The number one tactic to beat a dragon in any story is to strike its weak point, typically the underside of its belly. Homura also has a massive exploitative weak point, just not in the literal sense. Homura's weak point is her love, due to its ability to blindside and railroad her actions. No matter what, her actions will always be about Madoka first and foremost. If you ask me, that's why she even fell to despair in the first place. She was so hyper-focused on preserving Madoka's memory that she failed to care for herself. But Norse epics are not the only instance of Siegfried being relevant to Homura's character. It's time for a bit of a detour, as we now need to talk about both Swan Lake and the mysterious bells seen in the end of the latest trailer. The classic tale of Swan Lake sees an immature Prince Siegfried being given an ultimatum by his mother on his 21st birthday, telling him he needs to marry a woman now that he is to take the throne. Being the young man he is, he's simply not ready for the responsibility of marriage or the throne, and with a bout of frustration, he takes the crossbow given to him as a present into the woods to blow off some steam. While in the woods, Siegfried nearly fires upon a swan but stops when he sees it transform into a beautiful woman named Odette. She explains she and many other maidens were cursed by a sorcerer named Rothbard to turn into swans, only able to take their true forms at night. She tells Siegfried that the only way to break the curse is if someone makes a vow of love for her, but should the vow be broken, she'll be cursed to remain in the form of a swan. Siegfried falls deeply for her and promises to marry her. The next night at the castle, the queen arranges for all the eligible women to meet the prince, hoping for him to choose one. He refuses to make a choice, and the assembly is interrupted when Rothbard and his daughter arrive in disguise. Rothbard's daughter, Odile, looks identical to Odette and captures the attention of Prince Siegfried. Remembering his meeting with her the night earlier, Siegfried declares his love for who he believes to be Odette in front of the entire audience. The real Odette reveals herself outside the castle, despairing as Siegfried's love was mistakenly declared to the wrong person, breaking his vow to only love her. In a final act of desperation, Odette drowns herself in the lake while she still has time in her human form. Siegfried, equally distraught by his mistake and his beloved Odette's death, follows her and jumps into the lake to join her in the afterlife. Their joint sacrifice depowers Rothbard and breaks his hold over the other trapped women, who turn back into humans as Odette and Siegfried come together in heaven. Wonderful ballet performances aside, what does this mean for Homura? Well, as we touched on earlier, ever since the Rebellion story, the creators have explicitly referenced the ballet and dance as motifs that are important to Homura and Madoka. And in the concept movie, one of the first things we see is that Homura is watching as Madoka practices ballet. Furthermore, in Walpurgisnacht Rising, we are shown that one of the doppelganger Homuras is dancing with Madoka, even catching her in a ballet pose in one of the trailers. We can't really compare Homura to Prince Siegfried without diving a bit deeper into the symbolism of the story of Swan Lake, as on a surface level reading, it might feel like there's only a few links between the two. First, let's talk about version differences in Swan Lake. Most takes on the story feature Odette and Siegfried dying together by jumping into the lake at the end of the ballet, but the original version actually features a much more ominous ending. When he learns of his accidental betrayal, Siegfried immediately rushes to apologize to Odette, and in an effort to prevent the two from coming together, Rothbart summons a storm. As the story comes to a close, both Odette and Siegfried are implied to be swallowed up by the tempest in the lake. The first thing you should think about when we mention storms and Madoka Magica is Walpurgisnacht. Her arrival is something humans cannot comprehend the true form of, so they just see it as a powerful and vicious storm. In the original show, we also see that Homura and Madoka come together in the midst of this storm, and specifically it is when Homura is about to give up and presumably let herself die. In this way, Walpurgisnacht is like Rothbart to Homura and Madoka. If we look at the narrative from the end of the Rebellion story moving into Walpurgisnacht Rising, we can find a pretty important allusion to the story in the form of Homura's love. Homura loves Madoka. This is a solid fact of the story. The version of Madoka that inspires Homura to be who she is now, however, is simply not the same Madoka who she ends up being around the most. It's not an explicit betrayal, it's not like Homura has declared her love for someone who looks like Madoka, it's that while her love is true, it cannot possibly be directed at the one she fell for because that version has been lost to time by the result of Homura's wish and her time loops. In essence, Madoka is both Odette the White Swan and Odile the Black Swan. Still, I think we will find a much more interesting reading of the upcoming film if we instead turn our understanding around. While Swan Lake itself is more than likely what will have the most influence over the plot, I want to point out a story that itself is believed to be an inspiration for Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake Ballet. Turning our attention once more to the epics of Old Norse, we find ourselves looking into a figure named Brynhilda, one of the female warriors called Valkyries. In the Volsunga saga, the story goes that a king named Agnar once stole a magical swan shirt from the young Brynhilda, which in turn has her forced to swear an oath of loyalty to him. Despite her role as a Valkyrie meaning that she should fight on behalf of Odin, her oath forces her to interfere in a fight between King Agnar and another figure named Hjálmgunnar, the latter of whom Odin wanted to win. As punishment, Brunhilde is afflicted with a sleeping curse by Odin, stating that she must marry in order to be free of the curse. Brunhilde, before the curse takes full effect, swears that she would only reawaken if a man with no fear came to take her hand in marriage. After this, Odin places her to rest atop Mount Hinderfjall, surrounded by an impenetrable wall of shields. It's here where Siegfried, in this story Sigurd, enters the narrative and awakens Brunhilde from her slumber. While the pair do promise to marry, time passes and Brunhilde's desire remains to be a warrior. Despite this, Sigurd convinces Brunhilde to reconsider and they are to be wed. Another figure named Gudrun comes to Brunhilde asking her to interpret her nightmares, and Brunhilde declares that Gudrun's nightmare was prophetic. She would marry a man beguiled by a potion made by Grimhild. This man would die shortly after. Gudrun would then marry another man named Atli, lose her brothers, and then kill her new husband. The first part of this prophecy comes true when Sigurd drinks Grimhild's potion and loses all memory of his vow of marriage to Brunhilde and courts Gudrun. Grimhild proposes that Gudrun's brother, Gunnar, should marry Brunhilde instead, but he is unable to clear the wall of flames in Brunhilde's abode, and she will only take the hand of a man with no fear. At the suggestion of Grimhild yet again, Sigurd and Gunnar exchange shapes and Sigurd clears the trial with ease, successfully making it look as though Gunnar is the man with no fear who Brunhilde described in the terms of her marriage. When she learns of the deception, Brunhilde demands Gunnar kills Sigurd and the rest of the story plays out with her overcome with several emotions as Sigurd is killed as she asked. She distributes her gold and later takes her own life by sword, with instructions for a funeral pyre to hold her and Sigurd on it together. We can see how this likely inspired Swan Lake or similar Swan Maiden style fairy tales. We have transformation, swan vows breaking curses, betrayal of a vow due to deception, doppelgangers, and death of the maiden and her lover. The main difference here is that the maiden is the one who is deceived by her lover, instead of the male lover being deceived by a doppelganger. If we fast forward to and reconnect with Walpurgisnacht Rising, what we see is something astonishing that we've known about for a long time. The existence of some kind of doppelganger who appears to look just like Homura, who we have been calling Wasu. If the concept movie translations were accurate, we know that Homura herself does not trust Wasu, but Madoka, confused by Homura's hostility, is taken by Wasu's appearance, likely because she looks so much like Homura. While we'll be seeing elements of Swan Lake in the film, I believe the deceived and deceiver roles will be drawing their origins directly from the Volsunga saga, and much like how Brunhilde's discovery of the deceit causes her to snap, perhaps once Madoka realizes she's been following an imposter, we will see a very similar snap occur within this story. Oh, right, so the bells. Yeah, I think they're going to be used somewhere in the film to signify when Wasu has gotten close enough to Madoka for whatever her plan ultimately is. I feel confident enough in suggesting that yes, these will be quote-unquote wedding bells, just not for Madoka and Homura. So, right as I was beginning to record, the Madoka Magica social media account on Twitter shared an art sheet revealing the new Clara doll designs. They've been dropping a new tweet every day leading up to the film's release, but I haven't really been covering them as it's mostly information we already know. But this time that's not quite the case. As if this script needed any more revisions. Oh well, anyway. So, what's the deal with these new Clara dolls? Why are they blue and why do the designs look so drastically altered? Well, let's see exactly what it is that's happening here. Firstly, the count of Clara dolls remains as it always has been, 14, with the 15th one, Love, missing. Though, if you are keeping up to date with Madoka speculation, the common belief is that Homura herself is the last Clara doll, though I have some thoughts on that I'll share later. Next, if you notice closely, it seems like most of the dolls have salamander tails, which fits perfectly if their forms are enhanced by the powers of Akuma Homura, who herself is now represented by the imagery of a salamander. I'm not saying for sure they all have salamander tails, as the artwork doesn't show if they all have tails to begin with, and the 10th one, Mie, actually looks like she has a cat's tail. Now, perhaps the most striking thing we have learned from this image is that their redesigns are seemingly adopting elements from the magical girls of the Holy Quintet. From what I can discern of this, the changes are as follows. Number 1, Ibari, and number 13, Higami, take on aspects of Madoka. Ibari and Higami represent arrogance and resentment respectively. Number 2, Nekara, and number 3, Usotsuki, take on aspects of Mami. Nekara represents gloominess, while Usotsuki is classified as the liar. Number 4, Reiketsu, has aspects of Homura. Reiketsu is representative of cold-heartedness. Number 5, Wagamama, 9, Namake, 10, Mie, 12, Monica, and 14, Ganko seem to all take on aspects of Nagisa. In order, they are selfishness, laziness, show-off, foolishness, and stubbornness. Number 6, Watakuchi, and 7, Norama, take on aspects of Kyoko and possibly Momo? Watakuchi is called Badmouth, and Norama is called Slowpoke. And finally, number 8, Yakimochi, and 11, Okubyo, take on aspects of Sayaka. Together, they represent jealousy and cowardice. I'm not 100% confident on this. For example, I find it weird that Nagisa seems to have so many references in the dolls of all the characters, 5 in total, while the average is 2 for each character. I'm not too sure on the reference I see with Monica in particular. The 7th doll, Noroma, could reference Sayaka due to it having a half-face mask, much like Sayaka herself wears in this film. Curiously enough, it also slightly resembles the face of Giovanna, the doppel form of Iroha Tamaki from Magia Record, so make of that what you will. The last major thing we can talk about is the fact that the color they have seems to pair with the Homura seen using the old rotary phone, in particular because of the color of her dress. Additionally, if you look at the 4th doll, Reiketsu, while she has design references to Homura, the specific reference is to this new Homura, as you can tell by her collar. Now, in my last video, I proposed a theory that I and the speculated character Wasu from the concept movie are one and the same, but held back a bit because of how absurd it sounded. However, part of the fun of speculation isn't necessarily to be right, so I don't want to worry about holding back based on fearing whether I'm right or wrong. So, could Wasu and I be the same character? Well, why not? Let's take a look at what we know, starting with Wasu. A quick TLDR for those who don't know, Wasu is a name that appeared in a screenshot of production notes featured in the concept movie trailer. Wasu in these notes is defined by a couple of important traits. Notably, Homura despises her. She and Madoka have an inexplicable link, and she looks like Homura enough for Madoka to confuse their identities. Fans speculate Wasu is codenamed as such because she will become Walpurgisnacht, and the witch's name in Japanese is read as Walpurgisnacht, Wasu. It's this idea that she could become Walpurgisnacht which makes it hard to believe she could also be a minion of another witch. Minions do evolve into witches, but the assumption is that they evolve into the same kind of witch. Here's my problem with that assumption, and correct me in the comments if there's some obscure lore that I'm missing. A witch comes about because of a specific girl's trauma manifesting. I find it hard to believe that you could replicate a witch like that while skipping out on all the parts that made that girl become that particular witch. From what we know, minions become witches after they feed off of enough despair, and they reasonably can only do that by feeding off of the despair of multiple people, so many different sources. Does it then not stand to reason that a minion would more than likely turn into a witch different from its source by doing that? If we accept that, there's nothing saying I has to become another Homelily. Let's zero in on I. All we know is the following confirmed facts. I is representative of love, and is who the other 14 Clara dolls were waiting for in the rebellion story. I could either explicitly be Homura or look the most like her, and her outfit is a black and white gown. My belief is that I is not the original Homura, but is a separate part of her, much like the other Clara dolls. However, because love is the driving force behind Homura's motivations, and potentially even the source of her power as a demon, I, the representation of love among the Clara dolls, stands out as the strongest. If a representation of Homura's love were out and about, why would we expect it to do anything but make a beeline straight for Madoka the second its feet touch the ground? And if this is true, in what way is she different from how Wasu is described in the concept movie production notes? If you ask me, there's not much separating the pairing concept, and it's why I believe they could be one and the same. Okay, now let's run through some rapid fire details I felt didn't need their own section before wrapping up the video. I want to talk about the nun. Off the bat, no, I doubt this has something to do with Kyoko. I know that's the easy answer, but that just seems very out of place. My first guess is that whoever this is, they are tied to Homura. Regarding Homura, we know she was once a student of a Catholic school in, I believe, Tokyo, so she has a link to the church due to her past. However, unless learning about her, I don't know, mother is really important to the story, I don't feel confident in saying that this has something to do with her so directly. The figure is obviously an adult woman, or its mommy. Either way, it's definitely not Homura, so the only way it can be tied to her is if it is a relative or someone Homura knew when she was in Catholic school. But at that point, we're just inventing random scenarios instead of looking objectively. The only way it would be tied to Homura while also putting focus on someone who isn't her is if we have flashbacks to more of Homura's past. There's an important factor we need to consider. We're talking about being shown a character without giving us a look at her face, which to me would mean revealing her face would be a big deal. Now, I know I said this about the amalgamation and her eyes, and ultimately ended up being wrong, but we're so close to the film's release that I can't help but be at least a little suspicious of them hiding this. The bell that she holds has something like a pearl inside of it that glows when the bell is shaken. And if you look at what we can see of the color of her outfit, it seems to be glowing too, which might signify a change in form. The shot that follows it has a pair of hands that belong to either someone else or the same person in a different outfit. You can see by their sleeves that there is a difference. They are, however, in the same location as the nun, and the object they're holding has a similar appearance to the bell, even down to the pearl or gem and the red string it's attached to. The only object we see in the series that comes to mind as being even remotely similar in what we could see here is a soul gem. Think about it, soul gems change shape between a brooch-like object worn somewhere on the body, an ornamental piece that looks like an egg, and a ring from which the egg-like ornament forms. Maybe the bell is a soul gem and the outfit changes like that of a magical girl's traditional transformation. It would explain the glowing, because it would be the magic of a soul gem. That, of course, would mean this nun character is herself a magical girl. Towards the end of the trailer, shortly after the scenes of the nun character, we see Sayaka in a mysterious space of some kind. I don't think I have seen anyone mention this yet, but it is pretty clear that Sayaka has had her bandages removed here. It could be before she has them put on, but to be honest, I don't think so. Something about the scene tells me it's towards the end of the film. So how come she's healed? I mean, the only reasonable answer would be Madoka or the Law of Cycles healing her, I think. Maybe it's Kyoko who helped her? I don't know. If I was putting money on it, it'd be Madoka's doing. We do see Madoka holding someone's hands, which might be causing that person's body to glow. Then the scene following it shows a close-up of Sayaka as she sees a flash of purple, and the scene of Sayaka without her bandages, the editing implying that these scenes are linked. Don't fall for this. As easy as it would be to go with this as the answer, we need to point out the obvious. The close-up shows a flash of purple. If Sayaka was looking at Madoka, it would surely be pink that we see flashing in her eyes, right? Unless I'm wrong in what the color is, I imagine she's probably looking at something that Homura is doing. Something is up with Sayaka though. For one, it's her who gets the final spoken line of the trailer. She says what I can determine to be "Ah, nante toshi," which translates to "Ah, how lovely," though the official translation reads it as "Oh, how precious." Now, coming from Sayaka, that line is rather strange, especially given that we know she's going to be put through the ringer in this one for sure. If I had to guess, this too is tied to the scenes of her seemingly being healed. But what is she saying it for? I doubt it's just that she's admiring her healed form. Sayaka is not that type of person. The background where healed Sayaka is stands out to me as especially relevant, as it seems to follow a similar style of background we see with Homura praying, which itself seems to be tied to the cloudy background we've seen a few times in different trailers. My best guess is that these backgrounds are part of the space governed by the law of cycles, and as such, we might see everyone brought up into it at the end of the film. Yeah, screw it, let's have another crackpot theory for the road. Sayaka becomes the law of cycles, and that's what this ending quote is from. At the start of, and again early into the latest trailer, we see a peculiar cage that is covered by a white cloth. I have no clue what to make of this, but if I had to throw an assumption out there, I wonder if this might be where the piece of Madoka that Homer stole from the Law of Cycles is actually kept. I wonder if there's going to be some sort of recursive world inside Homer's labyrinth. Surely she wouldn't just let Madoka wander around when there is so much that could go on after all. Okay, so what is Fiction Junction? This name popped up and had some people unsure of what it meant, but rest assured we do have an answer. Fiction Junction is the name of a musical project helmed by the legend herself, Yuki Kajiura, and has actually been active since 2005. It's not so much a group as it is a solo project which has other artists collaborate from time to time. All that you really need to know is that Yuki Kajiura is back as the writer and composer for the movie's theme song, which is titled Kanata. Some time ago, I suggested that the delays probably have something to do with the music for the film, as all we had heard for so long were reused tracks. Of course, we can't confirm this, but it is great to finally hear a new Kajiura composition. While we don't have confirmation of Clara returning, I would be surprised if they don't also come back. On July 1st, it was confirmed that a manga adaptation of the film will hit the market shortly after the film, with an expected release date of September 18th. I am so happy to hear that the book will be illustrated by series veteran Hanakage, who you'll recognize as the person responsible for the art and script of the original manga adaptation, the Rebellion manga adaptation, and the different story. It's currently listed at a price of 979 yen with tax and can be pre-ordered now. It's highly likely that scans and translations of the book will hit the net for overseas fans before the movie gets an international release. So there is my video detailing all of my thoughts on the latest trailer, and other observations that I've had since. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope the wait wasn't too long. I want to be real here for a moment with you all. I always worry about going into the script writing process for these videos, in that I'll come off as a know-it-all or that I might sound pretentious in my knowledge or whatever. I'm sure I'm overthinking it, but it is a thing I struggle with trying to balance. I obviously want to be taken seriously, and I think I bring some good observations to the table, but I would hate to be seen as the person who claims to be an authority on anything. Myself definitely do not think that. I think I have always got plenty to learn and such. I also mostly do these videos for two reasons. The first is that I think part of the fun of experiencing an ongoing story is this ability to speculate and discuss. Like other works inspire the creations of Urobuchi and Shinbo, their works inspire me with and many others. In this case, Madoka Magica inspires me to become so invested in our real-world history and many different cultures and beliefs. The second reason is I really aspire to be able to deliver information about this franchise to people in a digestible way. It brings me great joy to be able to tell people all about this random obscure knowledge and help make things more well known. This channel has been a great space for me to talk freely about my interests without too much worry. I make these videos because I love sharing my interests with others, and I'm just not in a position to naturally do that in my personal life. I recently hit a personal milestone of 500 subscribers, which was amazing, and I am very grateful for that. But as I was working on the script, I suddenly also hit 600 subscribers. I'm genuinely astonished at this, and while I know it's not a lot in the grand scheme of YouTube, I'm still so grateful for the support. I love making scripted theories and analysis, but the drive for it comes and goes infrequently. I cannot promise when the next video is coming, but I will say this, I do know what the next scripted video is, and I might even have a bonus surprise in that video. In any case, I'm looking forward to the next update on the movie, which could be either a trailer at the end of the month or nothing until the movie releases in August. Whatever the case is, you can expect Luca Magica to be on the case at some point. Jokes aside, thanks for watching and supporting me. If you check the first link in the description, you will find a link to my recently made community Discord, where we discuss Madoka, Deltarune, and anything else that interests us. Hop on in and say hi, I'd love to have you. By the way, I'm currently hosting a community event that anyone is free to join. Share your theories for the upcoming movie, and when I get enough responses, I'll react and maybe review and debate them all live. You've got until the movie comes out on August 28th to submit your theories. Thank you to friends of the channel Electrosa and Evelyn for help with certain parts of the script on this one, and of course, thank you to the community for their compilations of information and archiving. Okay, well, let's end the video there. I'll see you all in the next one.